Hello friends, and welcome back to the Hall of Craft! I'm back with another video for you guys, and today I am going to be building my very own set of dungeon tiles. So, like many of you, I found myself getting into the hobby by watching other content creators. You know them, you love them, the legends. We got Black Magic Craft, we got DM Scotty, we got Runehammer, we got Wylock. Those are the greats, and those are the people that got me into the hobby in the first place. All of these channels, and 1,000 others probably, all have their own kind of take, their own claim to fame on how they like to build dungeon tiles. So back when I got started, I had built myself a set of these Black Magic Craft style half-inch thick polystyrene tiles, and this is what I had used for like almost all of my games back then, and they work really well. And now that I'm a bit more of a seasoned crafter, I want to try and take a look at tiles and revisit them and maybe put a bit of my own spin on them. And I just want to preface this by saying this isn't me trying to kind of like put out my own kind of patented tile build and like present this like this is going to be some kind of new revolutionary tech to the crafting game that you're going to have to call Hall of Craft tiles moving forward. I find the idea of that to be a little bit cringe, so I'm trying to stay away from that. This is more just me trying to build an updated set of tiles that kind of check all the boxes that I want them to check for my own table, and just kind of sharing that process with you. So you know, obviously I'll take you through all the steps like I normally do, but I don't want you to kind of take away from this video like I'm trying to think I'm some revolutionary crafter who's using all these new techniques. It's more of the opposite. I'm kind of taking all these techniques that other people have put out into the world and then kind of amalgamating them into a set of tiles that really work for me. So there's 4 things that I really wanted to have these tiles achieve for me. I wanted them to be really durable, I wanted them to be really good looking, I wanted them to be really long lasting, and I wanted them to have a very slim profile. I think one of my biggest gripes with the Black Magic Craft style that I've been using for a while is just that they are so thick. Half-inch thick is very substantial, and they don't have a lot of weight to them, so they kind of get knocked around a lot. They're really great for what they are, but I just kind of want to try and refine the process a little bit. And with all of that said, I just wanted to kind of address elephant in the room a bit. I haven't posted in 101 days as of recording this right now, and I know that that's kind of shitty. You guys kind of like to have content creators that post frequently, and YouTube really likes to have content creators who post frequently, but YouTube's kind of always been a hobby for me, and I try really hard not to let it become one of those things that kind of eats away at my brain and makes me feel guilty about not posting in a while and stuff like that. All these other things that you've heard YouTube creators complain about before, burnout and all that. But I did just want to kind of address that reality and say that I haven't forgotten about you guys, haven't forgotten about the channel. I really appreciate all of the nice comments that come through from you guys and all the support you've given me so far. So I'm definitely not abandoning you guys, but I have had a significant amount of kind of life-changing events happen in the last little while. I'm moving, I bought a new condo, gonna get some more space, gonna have my own dedicated crafting room, so kind of dealing with all of that first-time home buyer business, which is very stressful. Got in a car accident, everybody's fine, but dealing with all the insurance stuff has been not super fun. On a good note though, I got a promotion at work, but that is also taking up more time. I am working harder for those extra dollars, so all of those things kind of happening together have created a bit of a dry spell here on Hall of Craft, so just wanted to kind of address that, let you guys know that I haven't forgotten about you. I appreciate all of your support, and I will keep making videos even if they are a little bit slower, but just bear with me, I guess is all I'm saying, and appreciate you guys. Now, with all that out of the way, let's just jump into the build, and I will show you how I put these bad boys together. So the absolute first thing that I did was actually open up Adobe Illustrator to kind of sketch out my concept and make sure that everything kind of flowed the way that it did inside my brain. Now, I am a graphic designer by day, so Adobe Illustrator is a program that I am ultra familiar with. I use it literally on a daily basis. There are plenty of other cheap or free alternative drawing programs that you could use instead. This is just what I'm using because it's what I have available. Anyway, using Adobe Illustrator, I start by drawing out a bunch of 1" by 1" boxes, and I assemble them into various tile shapes. One of the biggest decisions you have to make when making your own tile set is how many various sizes and shapes of tiles that you would like to have, and how are those going to fit together. Because space is an issue for me, I live in a condo, I wanted to make sure that I considered how these tiles are going to fit together and stack on the shelf, because I need to be very efficient with my use of space. I toyed with the idea of making a 2x2 and a 2x4 and a 1x5 and a 3x3. These are all the most common sizes of tiles that you see other people make, along with a larger 6x6 for when you need to make larger rooms and you don't want to be laying down a ton of different tiles. After building these out, I started plotting how I would have the magnets fit in. This is where having it in Illustrator as an object really changes the game. After plotting out the positive and negative connections to all the sides, you can group them as an object and rotate them and duplicate them, making sure that your tiles will fit together and line up well. You can actually take this to an extreme and essentially build a big board the same way you would out of real tiles. So doing this process revealed two things very clearly to me. The first thing is making sure that you alter the polarities of your magnets, positive and negative, so that no matter what way you rotate your tiles, they're always going to connect together. I kind of addressed a very simplified version of this in one of my older videos where I make modular minecart tracks, but this is kind of like taking this to the next level. The second thing to consider is that you will not be able to use this method with a tile that has an odd number of squares on any given side, because that will not fit into the alternating magnet method. It just won't line up properly. Looking back at the tiles I have, most of them are even, so I just delete the 3x3 from the lineup and change the 1x5 to a 1x4. I will be treating the 1x4 piece a little bit differently. It's not quite as modular as the rest, but I thought it was important to have some skinny haul pieces for when you want to have claustrophobic encounters. Okay. So, sorry if that wasn't as sexy as cutting up some foam or just watching me straight up craft, but I thought it was important, or at least helpful, to see the kind of planning phase of this project, so you can kind of keep it all straight in your head and know like why I'm making what pieces and what purpose they have, where the magnets are going to be going, etc, etc. Let me know in the comments if you found this first part helpful, or if you're just kind of here to see me craft and you don't care about the upfront stuff. That would be helpful, because if you don't care for it, I won't keep showing it. But anyway, let's move on to the craft. The first step for constructing the tiles is to create some templates. I traced these out onto medium weight chipboard for durability, and then I cut them out with a pair of kitchen scissors for the short cuts and an X-Acto knife for the longer cuts. Once they are cut out, I'll take a 120 grit sanding block and sand them down so that they are slightly smaller than the size I need them to be. Now I'm going to start building the base structure of these tiles. Because I wanted these to have a very low profile, to do this I am using foam core. Specifically, I have black dollar store foam core with the paper ripped off of both sides. It's important to rip the paper off, not because I want to texture these actually will not be exposed at the end of the build, but actually because warping is going to be a thing we really have to consider with this build. The thinner something is, the easier it warps. So having a low profile is going to create a challenge of making sure that we are very cognizant of avoiding anything that could be a warping hazard for these tiles. And the paper on either side of the foam core is a warping hazard. Paper will soak up whatever moisture gets into it and it will just curl as it dries. So get that paper out of here. We have no reason for it anyway. So I just trace out my templates onto the foam core and then cut them all out. Once I have them all cut out, I sort them into big stacks. I'm making quite a few tiles for this build, which makes each step take quite a long time. But these tiles are going to be made to last, so I'm hoping that I will be enjoying the fruits of this labor for quite a while to come. Now for the details on the tiles, I'm going to be using foam core plates, which is a technique that I explored in my last video for the flagstone base on my fire pit. Link in the top right if you missed that. I never remember if I'm pointing the right way, so I will make fun of myself in editing if I got it wrong. Anyway, let's continue. To do this, I prep a bunch of plates by cutting the rims off of them so I just have that circular center area inside the middle that is flat. I test on one first to see how many square tiles I can get out of each plate. Then I do the math to see if I have enough plates or if I need to go get some more. Now that I know I do, I charge forward, turning all of these foam plates into 1 by 1 inch tiles. Once I have them all traced, but before I cut them out, I texture them with a tinfoil ball and a rock to get that good texture on while they're still solid and I'm not holding onto a ton of little squares 1 by 1. These foam plates have some sort of coating on them that makes them a little bit more difficult to get a good texture on. I found the best way to texture without breaking them was to place the rock on my table and just mash the plate surface into it. Once you're done with that, you're going to be pretty tired from exerting your will over 30 sheets of foam, so it's best to convince your art director that cutting out the squares is satisfying and that she will do most of that for you. Now we just mix up some PVA glue with a little bit of water and paint that all over the foam core surface of each tile before placing the thin foam tiles into place on the surface. Then you just set them aside to dry and move on to the next one. Once they are dry, I come back with a sharp pencil and add some cracks and chips to random tiles for extra detail and differentiation in the tiles. After that's finished, you may notice that some of your little tiles are overlapping the edges of your foam core. Don't panic, this is a really easy fix. Just take a knife and drag it along the edge, cutting off any overlapping bits until it is flush, and then you should be good to go. Now you can start to see how these tiles fit together nicely. Basically, you can fit 3 2x2s, 2 2x4s, and 2 1x4s together on top of a 6x6 tile. So if you cut them in these increments, you will have a perfect square stack of tiles, which I have.
Unless the enemy has a study, he's a gripper. Which I have.
So you may have noticed that I have extra foam core pieces off to the side here. This is because only half of my tiles will be stone tiles. The other half I plan on making into wooden floor tiles. For this I'm going to use foam plates again, but just in a slightly different way. So I will just remove them from the rims again. Now that I have a bunch more flat sheets, I will texture them aggressively on both sides with a wire brush. Once they're all textured, I'll take out my knife and using the lines on my cutting mat, I will cut them into 1/2 inch wide plank segments. Okay, so this time for the wood tiles, I'm going to scrap the PVA glue as an attachment method. I found it a little bit fiddly with the stone tiles, so this time I am pulling in trusty hot glue. This is going to make the tiles a little bit thicker for the trade-off of just making this process more fun and enjoyable, and this is a hobby that should be fun and enjoyable, so that's what we're doing. So I just make sure that the planks are alternating. I start with 2 that align in the middle of the tile. I'm totally fine with them not lining up perfectly. It adds a little bit more texture and character if they're a little bit rickety. Once they're all glued in place, I just flip it over and trim off the overlaps, same as before. So at this point you may be thinking to yourself, Alistair, you told me these were going to be durable tiles. It's just a layer of foam core and some disposable plates. That sounds pretty flimsy. Well, I've got you covered. Here's the step where we fix our flimsy problem. I'm going to use my templates from before, the ones I cut out of medium weight chipboard, and I'm going to use those to cut a bunch more pieces out of medium weight chipboard. These pieces are going to be stuck to the bottom of each tile to give them that stability that we really need, and it also happens to give them a little bit more weight, a little bit more heft to keep them from sliding around so much. Once I've cut out all these tiles, I will take my sand block like before and just smooth down the edges. Now that I've got a large pile of those, I am going to seal them on both sides with some black paint and Mod Podge, otherwise known as the Black Magic base coat. Thank you, Jeremy. This is to prevent any moisture from seeping into this chipboard at any later steps when we are painting or washing. Medium weight chipboard will soak all that up, and I do not want again, any warping here. So the black magic base coat is going to kind of protect this MDF from that moisture. Now it's time to add the magnets. The first thing I'm going to do is build myself a tool for inserting the magnets. This will make it a dream compared to doing it by hand, and I am not going to take credit for this. This is a tool that I got from Miscast Terrain video. I don't remember the title of the video, but I will find it and put it in the top right before I post, or when I post this, so that you can find it yourself and give him the credit he deserves. But he does not show you how to make it, he just tells you what it is. So I will go over very quickly how I made mine right now. To build this, I'm just going to take a chunky old paintbrush handle and cut it down to size. Then I'm going to sand it smooth on all sides. Now I'm going to mix up some milliput and mold a couple of nubs on either end and smooth them out with water. Once I'm happy with that, I just take a couple of spare magnets and I press them into either end, one side positive and the other side negative. Then I just take off any excess milliput and smooth everything out with more water. Now I just set that aside for a bit to cure, and once it has cured, I come back with Sharpie and designate one side as positive and the other side as negative. And that's it. You got a magic stick. Now you can use this tool to not only press all your magnets in place, but also just remove the burden on your brain of like making sure that it's correct, double checking it. All of that can be done with the stick. So it really just makes putting in these magnets kind of like a brainless process that you can just toss on a podcast, toss on an audiobook, and just go to town on it without having to worry about, oh, did I put that in right? Did I stop paying attention and forget? Like, none of that matters anymore. You got the stick, it solves all. The other beautiful thing about having this is once you have built it, and if you do use it for every single project you put magnets in, you will have consistent positive and negative across all of your crafts. So anything you make that's modular that can kind of interact with it, other crafts you make, so all of those polarities are going to match up, which is a very helpful thing to have. Now it's time to actually get the magnets into these tiles. I go through all of my tiles and I poke a hole with a sharp pencil in the middle of each 1-inch segment on all sides of all tiles, except for the 1x4 hallways. Those tiles just get one magnet at either end. The sides are not going to be magnetized. Off camera, I went through all of my tiles, and using a silver Sharpie, I just kind of marked out which points I wanted to be positive and which points I wanted to be negative on the underside of the foam core, just to further simplify this process. This turned out to be a fantastic idea because over the course of all of these tiles, I would be inserting over 800 magnets over the course of a few hours. So it's inevitable that through that process, your brain is just going to turn to mush, and having it not only marked on the tile, but also the magnets, the magic stick, it just makes this a brainless process for a brainless person. To insert the magnets, I just take the nozzle of my hot glue gun on low temp and enlarge the holes that I made previously with my pencil. Then I fill them in with glue, and using the magic stick, I press the 2mm magnets into place. After they're in, I wipe away any excess glue with my finger while it's still warm. Here's what they look like as a stack when you get them all filled in. The magnets actually help hold them together as a stack when you flip alternating tile layers upside down. Okay, so now that that's all together, and my chipboard bases have soaked up that black magic base coat, it's time to glue them to the tiles. I'm just going to use some more hot glue and attach the foam core side of my tiles to the coated chipboard bases. It's all starting to come together now. Once the foam core pieces have been attached to the chipboard bases and the magnets have been inserted, these tiles actually have like a very satisfying heft to them now. These are not flimsy and light. They will not get knocked around. I'm feeling very satisfied with the profile of these. Now that all of the tiles are attached to their bases off camera, I bust out the black magic base coat once again to coat the whole thing and protect them, also getting them ready for paint. It looks like the anti-warping precautions I took paid off. All these tiles are straight as an arrow. Anyway, let's get some paint on these bad boys. For the stone tiles, I'm going to be using a bit of a colder paint scheme than I normally would. I want to be able to use these as dank dungeon tiles, but also kind of town square. I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, so I'm not going to go too overboard. These aren't going to be like green tiles, but I do want a bit of a colder stone paint scheme. All of that to say, I'm going to be using cool tones as an undercoat. So I start by overbrushing them with navy blue craft paint, and then hitting some random spots with forest green. Next, I just take that blue-green base coated tile and I dry brush it with sky blue highlights. These are looking really cool, and this works well as an undercoat, but now I want to make them look more like stone. So I'm going to dry brush them all with gray, and then after that I'll dry brush them with a suede. Once that's all finished, I'm going to come back with a vanilla craft paint and dry brush just the highlights to catch all the edges and try and really make them pop. So these tiles are now looking really bright, but that's okay because we are about to hit them with a heavy oil wash. For this, I'm just going to mix up a couple different washes in some scrap containers. These are all just oil paint and white spirits. One wash is just black, one is black and green, and then the other is black and brown. Once I have them mixed to a good consistency, I coat the whole tile with black wash, and then pick out a couple random areas with the brown and green washes to add some variation. These will blend together naturally and give it like a nice kind of gradient effect, so I'm not too worried about kind of cleaning my brush or you know, taking breaks in between the steps. I'm just doing this all at once, just slathering these tiles in oil wash. Here's a side-by-side of the before and after the wash. Clearly much better after the wash. I'm really digging how these are turning out. Now let's get some paint on the wooden tiles. I really like the warm, cool contrast that I snuck into the stone tiles with the blues versus the kind of yellowy vanilla highlights. So I'd like to do something a little bit similar with the wood tiles. For my undercoat, I am going to use a grape purple. Once that's dry, I'm going to overbrush them with a wine purple. Now I'm going to move into the brown tones. I mix together some burnt umber 50-50 with golden brown, and I dry brush against the grain on the tiles. Here's what the before and after looks like. We're starting to get to see that awesome texture that we made earlier with the wire brush really come to the forefront. Now I dry brush just with straight golden brown, and we're starting to sneak in some of those yellow tones into the highlights here. The purple undertone is really going to contrast that in a subtle way, and I'm really liking how it's turning out so far. As the final highlight, I'm going to mix about 2/3 golden brown with about 1/3 vanilla craft paint, and then gently dry brush the highlight onto the edges of the planks. This step makes a huge difference. In fact, it looks a little bit like too much, like you've gone too far while you're doing it, but just remain confident the oil wash will come back down and kind of tie this whole thing together. For the oil wash on these tiles, I'm just making one big container of black-brown wash. I don't think adding green tones here would give me the look I'm going for. I just want to add some contrast to the recesses and dim those highlights down a bit. So just like with the stone tiles, I slather this wash all over all of my wood tiles. After they're all coated, I'll use a makeup sponge soaked in some white spirits to lift some of that wash off of the edges of the wood planks. And after both of my washes were dry, I was really anticipating these tiles being finished. I thought that this was it. This was the step that would finish the build. It was at this point I noticed there was two kind of major flaws with this build that I really wasn't okay with leaving as is. The first one is something that I found very strange, and I still don't really know why this happened. I've never encountered anything like this before. I found that on some of the edges of my tiles, there was kind of a sticky, glue-like, sappy residue that seemed to be like seeping out of the tiles around where the magnets had been placed. You can see them on camera here. They catch the light more than the area around them, and I'm really not sure what to make of this. I definitely wasn't okay with leaving it as is, but I wasn't sure kind of what caused this and how to prevent it. So I kind of figured that I would need some way to cover it up. And the second thing that I noticed was while stacking some of my tiles together, often a tile would kind of steal a magnet from the tile adjacent to it when you separate the two tiles, which means that, you know, the hot glue on its own in the way that I applied it was not strong enough in combination with the Black Magic base coat to keep the magnets from kind of pulling each other out. This isn't something I anticipated. I thought the hot glue and the Black Magic base coat would be more than enough, but Clearly I was mistaken. So I figured I can kind of kill two birds with one stone, solve both of these problems with the same solution. I just need to create some sort of border that is going to go around each tile and just kind of hold the magnets in and also cover up this weird sticky sap substance. Nailed it. So to do this, I just cut strips of regular printer paper to the height of my tiles, which conveniently was about 1/4 inch. Using a knife, I just cut 8 or 9 full sheets of printer paper into 1/4 inch long strips, until I had a pile that looked like this. Now to attach the strips, I just used a paintbrush to paint a full strength layer of white PVA glue along the edges of my tiles, and then I pressed the strips into place on the edges of my tiles, bending them over the corners and overlapping them when necessary. Once all of the edges of a tile were covered, I would dip my finger in water and smooth out the paper strips, making sure they conformed flush to the edges of my tiles. For the first time in my life, I actually prepared more of an ingredient than I needed to finish the job, and I actually had quite a bit of paper strips left over at the end. Here is what those look like when they were all dry. These magnets are not going anywhere now, and we have completely covered up whatever that sticky sap substance happened to be. So this solution worked out pretty well, but it has left us with one more step needed before we can call this build done. Like the base on a finished miniature, I have gotta paint these damn rims black. And once that's done, you've base coated all these bad boys rims black. Here's what the finished product looks like. Looking back in hindsight, I'm actually really glad that I kind of ran into that problem at the end and had to add this black rim to the tiles. I find that once they're on the table, it really kind of lifts them off the background and really makes them pop. I found that before they looked like kind of like a 3D element, but these are supposed to be floors. So I kind of like that that it kind of separates them. And I'm actually kind of happy that I had to do that. Although at the time I was very unhappy that I had to do that. The one trade-off is kind of that the strips there being an extra layer between the magnets and the other magnets does kind of weaken that connection a little bit, but not enough that you're gonna have them kind of disconnecting from each other on the table. Just, you might not be able to like build bridges out of these tiles, as they're not gonna be like stronger than gravity, but that's not why we made these anyway. Anyway, that's all there is to the build, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it and got something useful out of this. I'm really happy with how they turned out, and I'm really hoping that I can get back to in-person games sooner rather than later, so I can actually see these on the table and use them. But we'll see if Delta's coming for my fall plans or not. Fingers crossed, but we're all good. Anyway, friends, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I have plenty of other crafting and painting videos that you can watch while you wait a very long time for me to make the next one. I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great week. That's all there is to the build. Hope you enjoyed the video, got something out of it. I'm happy with how this turned out. I look forward to getting back into this.